Welcome to Water for Shepherds, a podcast providing words of encouragement for spiritual leaders around the world. Everything related to this podcast, past episodes, show notes, and resources can be found online at waterforshepherds.com.
Okay, I am pleased to introduce our guest and encourager for today, Tim Sherfy. Tim, are you ready to encourage and motivate our listeners?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, great. Tim is a writer and a life coach currently based in Indianapolis, Indiana. He blogs at evenifiwalkalone.com, where he seeks to instruct and encourage others to live their lives wholly devoted to Christ. Tim has over 25 years of management and leadership experience and is committed to sharing the lessons he has learned in life to help others become who God created them to be. Tim, I've shared a little bit about you. Take a minute and briefly share more of your story with our audience.
Well, thanks. It's really good to be here, and I'm glad that you're doing this because I am a preacher's kid myself, like you, and watched my dad through the years kind of need encouragement from other people as well. And, of course, when we were growing up, we didn't have the luxury of podcasts and things like that. So outside of listening to cassettes every now and then, it really is a little bit on an island. So my dad actually, before he became a pastor, he was in the Air Force, so has that in common with you as well. So I kind of grew up all over the world. I think the question I've always hated the most is, where are you from? Because, you know, it varies. So that was kind of the beginning of my life. I spent most of my early life as a musician, thought I'd be a drummer, and ended up blowing out my elbow, which kind of ended that dream. And from there, kind of got lost a little bit trying to figure out where I was going to go in life, because I had this one certain dream and it didn't go that way, right? But as you probably know, preacher's kids, we tend to have a little bit of a rebellious streak as we grow up. So kind of got away from the Lord a little bit, and then when the drumming thing went away, I'm like, all right, what is going on? And so it kind of took like a 10-year journey. I went through retail management, and then I went into IT. I did a lot of computer programming and into eventually management of computer programmers, things like that, just on the professional side, trying to figure out what I was doing. But along that way, just started finding more and more people at work that just were so far away from God and really had no idea what they were doing. And that actually drew me closer to God. I ended up working one place where there were I worked on a team of 5, and the other 4 were atheists, and we would go to lunch every day and just debate, and they really pushed me to define what it was I really believed. And as crazy as it sounds, going to having lunches like that and kind of getting beat up every day, that really grew my faith and inspired me to start looking into, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ. And since then, it's just kind of been a takeoff of that's been the driving force, learning really what it means to follow Jesus, and not so much what I always heard growing up of what people in the church should do and what a Christian should do. And I've just become very passionate about helping people find their calling. I believe that God has given each of us a combination of unique gifts and talents, and how to use those to serve his kingdom. And he's really blessed me and kind of brought me back to him for sure, and allowed me to use my gifts to reach out to people. And there's nothing really that excites me more. So that's about the 40,000-foot view of the last, 40-some years of my life.
Well, it's very interesting that we're both pastors' kids, and I appreciate the Air Force connection there too from your background. See, now I'm just enough of a antagonist that if people would ask me where I was from, I'd say my mother, and that would probably be the end of that.
I met my wife in Buffalo, New York. I never say that I lived in Buffalo. I say I did time in Buffalo, because it's just not a real nice place to live, in my opinion. I don't like the cold or the snow. But we would go over to Canada, and that's one of the questions they used to ask you back in the old days before you needed passports, like, where are you born? And I was born in Germany. That was never a good answer. You tend to spend a long time there with them asking additional questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tim, would you share a favorite quote or scripture along with your application and how that encourages you?
I wish I had a life verse. A lot of people have life verses, and I think that's really cool. But I've got like multiple things that I kind of hang my hat on. I love Isaiah 58, where they talk about what true fasting is, freeing the enslaved and standing up for the oppressed, sharing with everyone in need, feeds into Matthew 25:31-46, which everybody probably knows that passage is the sheep and the goats, where Jesus told us we need to feed the hungry and provide water for the thirsty, care for the sick, shelter the homeless, provide for the poor, things like that. And right into kind of post-Jesus, James 1:27 is one of my favorite verses, where it talks about what true religion is, caring for the widows and the orphans. And I always liken that in the modern day, like the widows are I think of those as the single mothers. There's such a problem with that in the world today, and the orphans being the homeless people and the displaced persons we see over in like Rwanda and Sudan and places like that. So I love bringing all those things together, because that's kind of what drives me. It's like, this is the things that Jesus told us we should be doing. People are always saying, I wish I knew what God's will for my life was. And I look at these verses and I'm like, this is what God's will is. Here's what he told us to do. It's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. So I kind of always rely on those passages of scripture. They always kind of pump me up when I'm feeling down. I look at them like, all right, here's the mission. It's time to start feeling sorry for yourself and get out there and change the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been on the side of application versus the theoretical, and so I think some of the things you mentioned here, the fasting and taking care of the sheep and widows and orphans, I mean, those are real things, real issues, and that's where the practical piece of this is.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up on the day-to-day life, especially I think with the Western Church. I mean, we're so blessed, and we have so many resources at our disposal, and we start getting caught up in almost like the Americanization of the church, right? So kind of finding the American dream in the church, and we forget that what the whole purpose of the church is, and it's to go out and help everyone else in need. Certainly we have our own needs, and I mean, we're talking about encouraging pastors and people in the church, and sometimes I think, just watching my dad, it's really easy to get caught up in the politics and whatnot of various, no matter really what size your church is, it's always going to have politics, and you get caught up in that. You kind of lose focus sometimes of, here's what our true mission is, and we need to get everybody back on board and get their focus right.
Mm. What I call that is the ugly underside of the beast, which I have seen.
Yeah, I know you have, so yeah.
Tim, what's one habit you've formed that have served you well and that you would recommend to others?
I'm an avid reader, so I'm constantly learning new habits and things like that. But I think one of the keys for me, this is going to sound so simplistic, but it's getting to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time each day. Getting enough rest is so important, and no matter what you do. So many times, people talk about their priorities, and as Christians, we kind of have our stock, right? It's like God first, family second, and you're somewhere down the list, but God is obviously always going to be first. But I think really we have to put ourselves second, and only from the standpoint of you have to take care of your health, or else you're not going to be able to serve God effectively. You're not going to be able to minister to people or improve your relationships if you're sick or tired. But just having a good night's rest every night, and it's so key, because if you're going on 2 hours of sleep and you're trying to go out there and feed your own flock, do a funeral, and come back and preach a sermon, and you get run down. So I think it's such a simple thing, but making sure that you take care of that is huge.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were talking in the pre-show about some commonalities that I may have seen in previous recordings, and I just happened to remember when you were talking about that has been one of the consistent things, is to take care of your health, and then being up at a regular time every day and getting started with your day in a correct and beneficial way. So that's something that I've heard over and over again as I've done this.
I think what you hit on there, getting up early, I mean, that I've got a crazy regimented life. I don't know where that comes from, but I'm just very structured, and I'm naturally a night person, so it was really a difficult transition. But I get up at 4:30 every day, just because I need that time where it's just quiet. I don't have any distractions, so I can take that time and read the Word and pray and work out and start my day. But you need that. I think we all need, especially as Christian leaders, you need that time where you can just kind of get alone. I mean, Jesus, there's examples in Scripture where he did it, just without the distractions and without the crush of all the responsibilities coming into view.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a very important point. Now, can you share one challenge you faced in your life and how you dealt with it, and ultimately what you learned from it?
Wow, one itself, that's a challenge, right? I think something that's kind of maybe not a specific, and I can certainly go into a specific instance if you want, but something that's really kind of been a theme through my life is just learning patience. I've never been good at that. So like I mentioned earlier about hurting my elbow, you think life is going one way and then it just totally derails you and you have no idea what you're doing and you're just waiting on God. Like, what are you doing here? Again, being a preacher's kid, like I said, we kind of are a little rebellious at heart. And I think I had to learn that discipleship is the ultimate in nonconformity, right? Because when you really sell out and follow Jesus with everything you have, you are truly a rebel of society. People don't understand it and they look at you kind of weird. But I just wanted, pretty much from a young age, I just wanted to use my gifts to reach the world for Christ. And it just wasn't ever happening. It seemed like I would hit dead end after dead end, and I never really understood what was going on and why Jesus wouldn't use me. I'd watch friends that would kind of excel in the ministry, and they would reach people. And from a background in music, I'd watch other friends, actually be successful in that venue. And obviously a lot of jealousy and misunderstanding on my part, which just was a great sign of immaturity, which is probably a good reason why I was being forced to learn patience. So just dealing with that through my life and kind of having misstep after misstep, I think that was very confusing for me and wondering what to do. But once Christ led me through it and just stuck with me, I mean, he's faithful even when we refuse to be. I think I saw that, I just wasn't mature enough at those stages of my life that I would have been able to handle it had he given me a bigger ministry. And I don't think I had the character at that point. Honestly, I just didn't have a consistent walk. I didn't have the disciplines built into my life that would keep me close to him. And I think it was hard. I had the wrong motives, and it was hard for me to kind of admit that to myself first and to see that the ultimate goal of reaching people for Christ is to enrich their lives and to glorify God. It wasn't anything about myself. It wasn't about exalting me. It was about exalting God. And I think once I learned that, I finally understood that he'd been developing this patience in me where I could wait on him and not be in such a hurry. But it's been that was a good portion of my life. So it was a lot of patience.
Well, that's amazing that you mentioned that, because patience, I will admit, is not an area I have mastered yet in my life. So when you said that hit me square between the eyes.
I was going to say, I'm not sure anybody ever masters patience, but certainly I think it's a close correlation with maturity, because we always want what we want now, right? And that's the flip side of patience. Just give it to me now. And we just have to learn to realize that God's going to give us everything that we need and everything that we need in order to further his kingdom. And it's not up to us to kind of rush it. So I think that's kind of the key, trying to just live in his rhythm. I look at life as kind of this it's not original, but like a cosmic dance. He wants us to help create the history that's going on in the world, and that takes patience. You can't get ahead if you get ahead in a dance, you're going to look kind of silly, right? So you got to lay back and feel the rhythms.
Right. Well, that's a great reminder for everybody listening, and specifically for me too. Now, on the opposite side, can you share an aha moment or a blessing or a success you've had in your life and how you handled that and what you learned from it?
This may sound like a challenge, but a few years ago, I was not immune from the economic downturn and ended up getting laid off from my job. But don't worry, the success will come. I know that sounds like a challenge. But it's crazy because like a few years earlier, I had found this crazy dude on the radio named Dave Ramsey, who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And, just totally, I was always the money guy in my family. I'm the guy that really got it. And I never realized how stupid I was until I started listening to Dave. But our family was so prepared for that it really, we barely skipped a beat when that came off. And it was just such a blessing that God had kind of led us to Dave Ramsey the right time in our life, that we kind of got our finances in order. And the crazy thing, that I guess this is a free plug for Dave Ramsey, but when you go through that process, his financial peace process, I mean, our marriage got so much stronger. It just drew us together. So when it came to this what should have been a big challenge of losing my job, we were so in tune, my wife and I, and we were well enough off financially that, we could weather the storm. We never got stressed. We just continued doing what we had always done, with our spiritual disciplines. And just, I had another job, and I think it was like 6 months. So right about the time that unemployment was wearing off. So that was perfect timing again. And we just never stressed through it. It just felt like God was with us through the whole time. And it was such a blessing, because I know if it would have happened to me, a few years earlier, it probably would have been not only rocked my faith a little bit, but probably would have rocked my marriage, and who knows what it would have done to my finances. So it's just the calmness that we had throughout that period, just because God had put certain things in our life at certain times. It was amazing. It was really cool to just kind of sit back, especially now that a couple of years past it, to look back and like, man, God really, really took care of us.
That's neat. And it's surprising to me how many people have gone through something like that and then come back in hindsight and say, what a blessing that was. Look at how God provided. And you wouldn't think that going into it, but that's usually what it looks like coming out of it on the other side.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy how that happens. And that's I wrote a blog post recently about, I don't understand how people go through life without knowing Christ. How do you do it without that peace? And I think that's something when you look at a situation of being laid off and you're like, Lord, you're in control. I don't really understand what's going on, but you can do it. But if you don't know Christ, I don't know where you turn. I think it's just amazing that we have such an incredible God that He's always with us.
So, Tim, what would you say are your greatest personal strengths, and how are they currently being used?
Well, I remember I started praying like probably in my late teens after reading about Solomon asking for wisdom. I started praying almost every day, Lord, just give me wisdom that I can use it for you, that I can help other people and understand their problems and help them work their ways through it. And I prayed it for years, and I never felt like, I started to feel like that's kind of a silly prayer, or maybe kind of arrogant to think that I would do that. But in the past, 5-7 years, I've started doing life coaching and financial coaching. And the answers sometimes that come out of my mouth for the problems of people that they bring to me, I have no idea where they're coming from, really. So I can only attribute it to, God has answered that prayer, and He's given me insight and wisdom in a lot of different areas. I mean, I've had kind of a crazy life, and I've got experience in a lot of different areas, but areas that I don't know about even, He just gives me a really strong clarity. That's awesome. I mean, I love helping people, and I love helping them understand the gifts that God has given them and how to use them in their life. So I think the wisdom is definitely a gift from God, and definitely has become a personal strength. He's always, all my life, I've had a ability to write. I've been doing it literally since I was very young. My brother's an incredibly talented illustrator, and he used to draw comic books and things like that, and he'd pay me $1 a page to write for him. So, I mean, as far back as I can remember, I've been writing, and being able to do it now for the kingdom is amazing. So I continue to use that skill. And just I've developed really strong discipline over the years to cultivate. You asked about habits earlier, just cultivating positive habits. And I think the three of those things working together, the wisdom, the discipline, and the writing, is probably my three biggest strengths. And it's really all wrapped up into what I do now between the blogging and the coaching.
I just wrote a word down here that my wife mentions quite often. It's rhema. So when you talked about wisdom and these words come out, a lot of times those are a rhema from God. And you didn't plan on saying that. And a little while after, you can't even remember what you said. So that's what I think of when I heard you describe that.
That's cool. I've not heard that before.
Again, on the other side, what are your greatest personal weaknesses, and how have you augmented those?
Well, we talked about patience. I think as much as I've learned, I think that's still one of my weaknesses. And I pray a lot more when I'm impatient these days. Just trying to, again, asking for wisdom, helping me to see, what's really going on here. What could I learn from the situation? I still struggle with, I guess it's almost a form of patience. I was going to say almost impatience, but I get really upset when I see Christians, and I'm certainly not at all exempt from this. I mean, I fail just as many times as everybody else every single day, but when I see people in the church, and maybe because of my upbringing, that we're more concerned about what color the pews are going to be than, how we might be able to reach out to people that are hungry and hurting right around us. I get very upset about those things, and I think I've still got a little way to go. My mom used to always call me an elbow in life. She said some people, we all are different parts of the body, and you're an elbow. And so I think over the years, I've just through a lot of reading and prayer, I've learned to not be so much of an elbow, be a little more gentle when I get upset about things like that. I'm very passionate about making sure that people understand why we're here. I mean, the war that goes around us every day spiritually is crazy, and sometimes we get kind of wrapped up into how comfortable and how secure can we be in this world, and that's not why we're here. And I really need to temper that I don't know if it's anger, hopefully it's a righteous anger, I don't know, but temper that in a way that I can not offend and be a blessing to people. So still working on that.
Well, I think there's two key things there. I'm going to apply what you just said. When I get impatient, I'm going to go to prayer. And I think that's a great immediate response. And then just tell your mom that the opposite side of the elbow is the arm around a brother. And so while you might be jabbing them with one side, you can put the other side around and give them a hug. And, it works both ways.
That is really cool. And I'm going to tell her. We have a Bible study this evening. I'm going to see her, and yeah.
Say we discovered there's another side to that elbow, Mom.
That's amazing.
It's the inside.
Oh.
All right, let's get into some quicker questions and maybe some quicker answers. We'll see. Do you have a favorite online resource like Bible Gateway that you use and would recommend to others?
I do use Bible Gateway. I think that's an amazing little app or website. I like being able to flip through the different versions as quickly as possible. But other than that, I mean, not so much from a Christian standpoint. I do use some tools like Evernote, and I'm a big GTD from David Allen to kind of getting things done. I use a application called Zen Done, Zen Done, where I kind of keep track of my various projects and helps me work through the day. I do listen to a ton of podcasts, so both from the Christian and the business world. I love websites like renew.org and elevationnetwork.org. That's from Elevation Church in Charlotte. They just stream 24/7 messages, sermons, and it's a great encouragement as you're working or if you're getting a little bummed out in the day.
Okay, great. Zen Done, Zendone.
Yep. They kind of went away for a little, and they've relaunched, and it's much better since they've relaunched. It integrates with Google Calendar and Evernote as well, so you can kind of have a nice little ecosystem to get one view of your day and keep you organized.
Okay, great. I'll check that out and put it in the show notes. Now, what's one book you would recommend to our listeners?
I read a lot.
Or the best book you've read recently.
Yeah, let me give you at least a couple, because, like I said, I do read a lot, and I'll give you one from kind of the Christian perspective and one maybe not so. From the Christian perspective, I just read All In from Mark Batterson. It's his newest book. That was absolutely tremendous. You want to talk about encouraging people. I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you're discouraged in any way, it just really gets to the heart of why we're here and encouragement for each day. And I also recently read a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. I think he started Remax, the realty company. But it really talks about focusing on one thing. What's the one thing in your life that you really have to accomplish? And, of course, that changes over time, but just staying focused on one thing at a time. But multitasking is such a horrible myth and a lie that we've all bought into. But just by keeping your focus, it really helps you to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And I always try and take what I learn from those kind of books and apply it spiritually. So what is the one thing I have to get done in my relationship with God that's going to make the most difference and most impact in the rest of my life?
Okay, let me make sure I have these straight. All In by Mark Batterson?
Batterson with a B as a whole. Yeah.
Okay.
Pastor in Washington, D.C.
And then One Thing by Keller?
Gary Keller, yeah. Keller.
Okay, great. And I'll link those up in the show notes also.
Cool. And I keep a reading list over at my website, too, if anybody is a crazy reader like myself, and you can see even more.
Okay, great. Tim, who or what has affected your thinking and helped you become a better spiritual leader, a better spiritual person?
Wow, there's been several pastors, several people that I've read, really. I mentioned David Platt. There's a pastor in Minneapolis named Greg Boyd who's really helped with a lot of my theology and helping to make sense of things for me. My mom, all my growing up, she's always been such an amazing prayer warrior, and I've always admired that, and I've always kind of wanted to emulate that. I think she's a far more committed praying person than I am, and I really worked on that. But I continue. There's a pastor I had in Buffalo. His name is Greg McLean. Also was in his church for about seven years, and just really kind of shepherded me and encouraged me to keep growing and open my eyes to see things in a new way. So really, I'm always looking for new mentors, and whether it's through books or through pastors or just friends. But those are some people that have really kind of changed my thinking.
Well, it's so important to have those people in our lives, and as we grow older, we can look back. And I know Zig Ziglar had a wall of gratitude, I believe, at his headquarters.
Yeah.
And those are the people we really need to remember and thank.
Absolutely.
So, Tim, can you share a final encouraging thought or piece of advice for our audience?
Yeah, one of the quotes I love, and it's kind of been quoted by a lot of people, and this is not a Christian quote, but I always try and apply things that way, but Henry Ford says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I think that way about spirituality. You can tell yourself you can't do something for Christ because you don't have all the qualifications, or you've got some baggage in your background. And if you convince yourself of that, or let Satan convince you of that, you're never going to do it. But if you tell yourself, you're able to do anything through Christ, the battle's already won. He'll give you what you need. Secondly, I would just say, kind of let go of Americanized Christianity and devote yourself to being a follower of Christ. One of the taglines for a book I'm writing is leaving Christianity to pursue a life of following Christ. We seem to have gotten things a little backwards, and we really just need to get back to the roots of, who Jesus is and what he told us to do, and just sell out to him.
Those are a couple of very important thoughts, and thank you for sharing those. Now, where can our audience find you, find out more about you, or contact you if they would like to do that?
Sure. They can find me at my blog, which is a little hard. I don't know what I was thinking when I bought the domain years ago, but it is evenifIwalkalone.com. You can also find out more at timsherfy.com, which will have a link to the blog there, and you'll find out a little bit more of what I've got going on. And certainly you can email me at tim@evenifIwalkalone.com. And you can find me at Twitter at Tim Sherfy. Maybe that's a little easier.
Sherfy.
You got it.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim, for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Water for Shepherds, a podcast providing words of encouragement for spiritual leaders around the world. You may contact us with your comments and questions at waterforshepherds.com. Please share these encouraging words with others, and as always, be encouraged.